From the palace came urgent cries. Disastrous news for Baron Arcus. His face went pale as he heard the words, "Mutant ants!" Frantically, he flung open his armor cabinet. One of the assistants informed him, "All the workers have been evacuated, but Sir Javier is still inside." Baron Arcus gritted his teeth and began donning his armor. He couldn't let his son perish underground. Inside the mine, Javier stood bloodied but unyielding, blade in hand, as waves of mutant ants swarmed around him. He growled, "Why do they keep coming?" Lloyd, holding a burning torch, shouted back, "Now's not the time for questions." Back to back, the two fought off the incoming insects. The heat, the lack of air, it was suffocating, but neither backed down. Lloyd quickly activated his underground scanning skill, searching desperately for methane deposits. If he could find one, he could blow the whole hive to hell. He remembered that methane often gathered beneath coal veins. His eyes glinted as the scan revealed a thin layer beneath the ground. "There!" he shouted, driving his shovel into the earth with furious energy. Javier covered him, slicing down the relentless ants, blood and chitin flying through the cave. Then the ground trembled, the two raised their heads and froze. A gigantic queen ant emerged from the darkness, her grotesque form towering over them. Lloyd looked at Javier. "Think you can take her?" Javier, panting, tightened his grip on his blade. "We don't have a choice." With a battle cry, Javier launched forward. A blue mana core flared from his sword as he slashed the queen's belly, forcing her to stagger. Lloyd kept digging. He struck the gas pocket. A hiss filled the chamber. He found the methane. He snatched his torch, turned to Javier, and yelled, "Run!" The two sprinted through the cramped tunnels, the queen giving chase. As they reached a narrow path, Lloyd turned and hurled the torch into the methane-filled tunnel. Boom! A massive explosion rocked the cave. Fire engulfed the chamber. Ants screamed and perished in the blaze. Javier dove over Lloyd, shielding him from the firestorm with his own body. Outside, Arcus was being restrained by knights, shouting to enter the mine and save his son. As the dust settled, a battered Javier still lay protectively over Lloyd. The brown-haired man stirred, ears ringing, eyes wide in disbelief. It worked. The queen was dead. He looked at Javier, realizing he had shielded him from death. Gently, he picked up the pink snake bell and apologized. He looked toward the blocked entrance. Activating his scanning skill, he found a path, more than 5 meters away. His oxygen meter blinked red. There was no choice. Gripping his shovel tightly, Lloyd began to dig. Javier, barely conscious, watched with blurred vision. Lloyd's voice echoed, "We're getting out of here. Together." Then Javier finally passed out. Javier's opinion of you has increased by +6. You earned 108 RP. Total RP accumulated 157. Lloyd gasped for air, drenched in sweat. Another notification. Oxygen levels critically low. Still, he didn't stop. Throwing the shovel behind his back, he glared at the system and growled, "Find me knowledge. Anything. Any skill to get us out of here alive." Inside the collapsing mine, the system overload alert blinked wildly in front of Lloyd. Surrounded by glowing blue rings of the interface, a message popped up. Detected. Knowledge absorption from surrounding mana, initiating sync. One after another, system notifications flashed. By fusing several unlocked skills, Lloyd could now access the powerful Azran core technique. He smirked, clenching his fist with renewed determination. All that training after the duel with Newman was paying off. A confirmation window appeared. "Would you like to master the Azran core technique?" Lloyd slammed yes. He planted his feet and focused. Blue light spiraled around him, forming a radiant column. His silhouette stood still, calm as the beam of energy wrapped around his heart. A message pinged. Mana capacity expanded by 120%. He pursed his lips. Even if a normal person trained relentlessly, they might not see results this fast. but I have RP. With a single click, he dumped all his RP into leveling the technique. Mana capacity expanded by 125%. He kept going, eyes fierce, finger clicking furiously. 200%. Dual ring core unlocked. Just as he was about to increase the level again, the system demanded 100 RP. He had only 7 left. Frustrated but determined, he activated a newly unlocked skill. Skill acquired. Energy Burst. Temporarily triples mana output for 20 seconds. Gripping his shovel, eyes blazing, he charged forward. Blue lightning pulsed across the tunnel as he dug with feral speed. Oxygen levels plummeted. He saw the meter blinking red. With a furious snarl, he activated his scanning skill, desperately searching for airflow. A faint hole appeared just 3 meters ahead. He dug harder, dirt flying, sweat pouring, lungs burning. Oxygen level? Critical. Warning, skill effect expired. Lloyd dropped to his knees, shovel falling beside him. Breathing heavily, he stared at the dirt wall between life and death. Behind him, Javier and the pink snake lay unconscious. The silence was deafening. He closed his eyes. Was this it? But no. He clenched his fists and forced himself back up, a crazed gleam in his eyes. Grabbing the shovel, he pushed himself beyond his limits. Just as the last bit of oxygen depleted and his vision blurred, a rumble echoed. Lloyd's fading eyes widened. Padong burst through the earth with a triumphant roar. Fresh air rushed in. Lloyd gasped, choking on relief, eyes filling with tears. He dropped the shovel and inhaled deeply. Maybe a peaceful life was still possible after all. Above ground, the moon bathed the mountainside in silver. Baron Arcus, clad in full armor, entered the cave despite protests from his men. Holding a torch high, he marched into the darkness. A familiar silhouette emerged. Lloyd, exhausted, carrying the unconscious Javier on his back.
Arcus dropped the torch in shock and sprinted forward. Achievement: surpass human limits through Azran core activation. Emergency skill triggered power mode. Active residue detected. As Arcus embraced his son, the moon rose behind them. The nightmare had passed. The next morning, in the brightening streets of a peaceful town, a man carried a crate and chatted with a janitor. "I thought the young master was a fool," he admitted, "but I was wrong." They recounted how Lloyd saved every worker, stood against the Queen Ant, and carried his knight out of hell itself. The story had already spread. Even the skeptical began to believe. This wasn't the same lazy nobleman they once mocked. Inside a sunlit room, Javier sat quietly, watching Lloyd, who lay unconscious in bed. Suddenly, Lloyd stirred, then slowly opened his eyes. "Notice, the residents of the estate are deeply impressed by your heroism. Loyalty increased. Bonus RP awarded for exceptional achievement. New balance, 507 RP. Lloyd blinked at the system screen above him. His eyes widened. A fool no more. He was a hero now.
Lloyd stood at the edge of a white rocky path leading into a vast cave. Workers bustled around, repairing the area, when their eyes caught sight of Lloyd and Javier entering together. A hush fell. The workers quickly bowed, saluting the two men with deep respect. One of the workers stared at Lloyd with admiration and a sly grin. This man was nothing like the nobles they knew. He was the real deal. Lloyd scratched his cheek with a sheepish expression. The praise still felt awkward. It had been 2 weeks since the ant incident. Torchlight flickered as the two descended deeper into the cave, where work on the stone mine was in full swing. "This place still isn't safe," Lloyd muttered, eyeing the walls. "Even a single overlooked detail could be dangerous." They moved cautiously through a narrow gorge, torches in hand. "We're looking for ant trails today," Javier said, "but I've got to ask, why do you keep putting yourself in harm's way? You could order others to do this." Lloyd didn't look back. "Because if I don't take responsibility myself, then how can I expect others to trust me?" Javier frowned. "You're the future heir of this estate. You shouldn't be risking your life so easily." Lloyd glanced over his shoulder with a crooked smile. "If I throw around enough money, no one's going to complain either way." The knight kept watching him, uncertain if this recklessness was admirable or foolish. System notification. Javier's favorability level is about to increase, but hesitated. Soon, they hit a dead end. "Let's check another route,"
Lloyd said, activating his scanning vision. His eyes lit up. There's a hollow chamber ahead. Without hesitation, he began digging. Javier, realizing what he was doing, raised an eyebrow. The queen may have laid eggs here? If the eggs haven't hatched, we destroy them. They entered a newly exposed chamber and froze. Tied up piglets, livestock, and webs. A green-skinned orc lay among the victims, paralyzed but breathing. Javier reached for his blade, but Lloyd raised a hand. Wait, no danger. The knight hesitated. That's an orc. Female, I think. Strange that the ants kept her alive. They paralyze their prey. Keep them fresh, Lloyd replied, already smiling with interest. Later at the palace, the rescued orc sat upright in bed. Lloyd is my savior, he declared. I will never forget this debt. Lloyd, seated across from him, squinted. That accent? Maybe I can use it for his character. The orc introduced himself with pride. I am Herach, son of the chieftain of the Steel Sand tribe. He pounded his chest with gratitude. Ask anything of me, and it is yours. Lloyd, ever the schemer, grinned. Great, then call your tribe. I need workers for the mine. Herach's smile faded. Ah, no, that I cannot do. Lloyd slumped in disbelief. Why not? You looked like a bad guy when you licked your lips, Herach said earnestly. Also, only commanders can give us orders. Lloyd's eyes narrowed. So I'm not considered a warrior. Huh. That's a problem. He remembered something from the orc traditions. Don't your warriors prove adulthood by slaying a giant ant? Herach nodded sadly. Yes, but I failed. I was paralyzed immediately. Lloyd clapped his hands suddenly, flashing a brilliant grin. Then congratulations! You did slay one! Herach blinked in confusion. I don't remember that. Of course not! You're unconscious! Lloyd stood dramatically. But I witnessed it all. You struck fear into the Ant Queen herself. Herach's eyes widened. Really? Even the monsters understood? Perfectly! They cried in terror, Lloyd said with a deadpan face. She screamed, How could I lose to a young orc like him? Even Javier stared at Lloyd in disbelief. But thanks to you, Lloyd added, we found the queen's lair. They stood side by side, looking at the giant ant's head mounted nearby. You are an unrivaled warrior, Herach, as am I. The orc stared at him, half moved, half confused. Unrivaled warriors. So, about those 120 orcs, Lloyd said with a glint in his eyes. Herach clenched his fist. They're yours. 1 week later. Tents dotted the highlands, the orc village of the Steel Sand tribe. Their chieftain, Aku, sat on a stone throne. With a solemn expression, he faced Lloyd. I'm afraid we must decline your request. Lloyd froze. What? Why? Aku explained. If we stop hunting, we grow weak. Our strength depends on fresh meat. Herach stood silently behind him, eyes lowered in guilt. Lloyd tried to reason. So you hunt every day? Yes, to maintain our muscles, Aku replied gravely. Javier muttered under his breath. To them, meat is sacred. It's their way of life. Lloyd chuckled awkwardly. So, if the meat didn't spoil for several days, you wouldn't need to hunt constantly, right? Aku opened one eye, intrigued. That is correct. Then, Lloyd stepped forward, smirking. What if I gave you a way to preserve meat?
The protagonist took a breath and looked back on their arrival at the Steel Sand tribe village. He remembered the moment Herach laid eyes on his father, Chief Aku. Tears welled up in both their eyes. Without hesitation, Herach sprinted forward. Aku did the same. The father and son collided mid-run, locking in a tight embrace. A shockwave burst outward, their raw energy powerful enough that Lloyd, watching from the side, narrowed his eyes in disbelief. That was just a hug. But if I'd stood between them, I'd be ground into powder, he smirked wickedly. If I had 120 of these orcs working construction, productivity would skyrocket 1,000-fold. Then came another spectacle. Herach proudly presented the head of the queen ant to his father. Cheers erupted. The chieftain declared the day a celebration, orcs raising their fists in triumph. Many began squatting with massive objects on their shoulders, as training. Lloyd blinked in confusion. Golden pillars? Golden lamps? Where the hell are they pulling these from? They're more expensive than elite sports equipment. Watching them train like beasts, Lloyd held his shovel tightly and grinned. This is exactly why I signed the construction contract. Free labor and hidden treasures.
Javier examined the agreement carefully. So, in exchange for building them a stone cold storage, we get their help and valuable materials. But we'll need special equipment to work with stone, he added. Lloyd turned to him. Ever heard of a cold storage that doesn't need magic? Javier blinked. No. It's a building made with granite. Royal mages preserve food with ice spells, right? This'll do the same, without magic. And how do you know all this? Javier asked skeptically. Lloyd waved him off. Circle knowledge. What's a circle? Too lazy to explain. Just know we'll need granite. Javier eyed the stone walls. I get the feeling this won't be easy, Lloyd sighed. No dynamite either. Then his eyes lit up. But I do have a substitute. The blue-haired knight frowned. You're thinking of using him, aren't you? Lloyd grinned slyly. This is a pivotal moment in Night of Iron and Blood. Somewhere else in the city of Narum, a purple barrier loomed over the city skyline. This is Narum, Sheon whispered. People stared at the barrier in horror. Inside, thousands of refugees were trapped. Their mana was being drained through the air. Javier, nearly a master swordsman, clenched his teeth. He had already unlocked his 4th mana ring, but now he was helpless. If I must give my life to save them, so be it. He held his blade before him. A swirl of blue energy appeared. He focused all his power, one ring protecting his mana core, the other 3 amplifying his strike. An explosion lit up the sky. Flames tore through the magical dome, punching a hole straight through. This single attack would later be known as the origin of the Iron and Blood Knight technique. Back at the mine, Lloyd looked on with a knowing grin. You can't seriously use that kind of technique here. Javier turned sharply. How do you know about this? Let's just say I had the same idea once, Lloyd replied, twirling a lock of his hair. You're lying, Javier scowled. Maybe, Lloyd shrugged, but try it anyway. Javier sighed, then chuckled under his breath. You'd still do it your way regardless. We always want the best for each other, don't we? Lloyd teased. Javier turned his back. If Lloyd's theory worked, then maybe it was worth the risk. He placed his blade against the rock. 1 ring protects the heart. The other 3, release. He drove the blade into the granite. A blast of bright energy erupted. Smoke filled the air. From within, Javier emerged, clothes torn, breathing heavily. You planned this, didn't you? He growled. Not at all, Lloyd lied, grinning. System notification. Javier's favorability, +3. Current favorability, -11. Earned RP, 54. Total, 561. Javier turned back. You know I'm a knight. I should be protecting the Baron, not mining rocks. Lloyd raised a brow. I didn't ask for a knight. I needed a wrecking ball. Javier's glare could cut steel. Despite that, construction progressed fast. Granite was delivered in bulk. Peidong, the massive orc, stood nearby. Humans watched in awe as the orcs hauled heavy stones like pebbles. I didn't even ask them, Lloyd said, stunned. They just like training. Javier nodded. To them, this is training. Lloyd's eyes glinted. At this rate, we'll finish 5 times faster. He looked at Javier. Now we just need insulation and ice. The knight replied, I sent soldiers to collect the materials. 3 weeks ago. Lloyd frowned. Then it's time we check on them. Javier held him back. Are you sure about this? We don't know what's out there. Lloyd put his hand on his hip. I'm responsible for this site. I have to go. Javier sighed. Then let's move. Later. White clouds drifted over quiet cliffs. A single glove lay in the dirt. Lloyd picked it up. These are the gloves I ordered, for insulation work. Javier stood silently beside him. At the edge of a nearby gorge, the knight whispered, There's something strange here. The flow of mana is unstable, blurred. Lloyd's brow furrowed. This gorge. I've read about it in Night of Iron and Blood. Then his eyes widened. He turned around sharply. We're leaving, now. Javier followed. What is it? Lloyd spoke softly, almost trembling. Our men. They might already be dead. Javier stared at him in horror. White clouds drifted lazily above the jagged rocks as Lloyd stood before a patch of scattered straw. He crouched, picked up a piece, and clenched it tightly in his hand. He and Javier arrived at the mouth of a dark cave nestled within the rugged ruin gorge. This is the place, Lloyd said grimly. It was mentioned early in the novel as one of Javier's major objectives. The dark mage Ruffin is hiding here. His expression twisted with fury. How dare he lay hands on our men, entering private territory? That's a sin worthy of judgment. Javier gripped his sword tightly and stepped toward the entrance. "Let's go." "Wait," Lloyd called out, just as the knight's foot pressed down on a faintly glowing magic circle. Boom! An explosion erupted in front of them. The shockwave sent rocks tumbling as they braced themselves back to back against the wall. Javier scowled. A magic trap. Lloyd raised an eyebrow. "Are you really a knight? You should have seen that coming." He recalled the book vividly. Javier was once wounded by this very trap while seeking shelter in this cave. But he also remembered, Javier never makes the same mistake twice. They pressed forward. "There," Lloyd pointed. "The mana flow is dense. I'll use my technique here too." Javier spread his arms and closed his eyes as blue particles of mana drifted through the air like glowing dust. "In natural environments, mana levels are constant," Lloyd explained. "By detecting fluctuations, I can pinpoint magical traps." The particles began to connect like a glowing web, outlining the hidden hazards. "You've got sharp senses," Javier admitted, impressed despite himself. "Finally admitting that," Lloyd said with a smirk, tossing his shovel over his shoulder and walking ahead. Javier followed. He's always lying or scheming, but lately, something's different. He's predicting events before they happen. As they walked deeper into the cavern, tension rose. "We need to locate the hostages quickly," Javier said. Inside a hidden chamber, a man in black robes stood silently by a table filled with grimoires. The air was thick with mana and blood. "Did the trap go off?" he muttered. "So, someone's come." He shut the book with a sharp thud and turned toward the iron door, eyes burning with anticipation. Perfect timing. The experiment's ready. He entered a dim room where men were tied up, bruised and bloodied. "You'll do nicely," the mage sneered, dragging one by the hair and tossing him into a glowing red circle. "This is a circle that links to the realm of the Reaper," he whispered, lifting a sinister scythe. 100 days of blood, pain, and youth. Just what I need. As the terrified victim screamed, the door behind the mage creaked open. "Hey, you!" Lloyd's voice rang out. "Don't you dare touch him!" Ruffin.
The walls around Lloyd and Javier shimmered. Suddenly barriers formed, walls, front and back. They were trapped. "Let's see how long you last," Ruffin snarled. "I'll put you both to sleep before I deal with you." Lloyd's eyes flashed green as a system notification popped up. "System buff, activated, no fatigue, 10 minutes remaining." Grinning, he slammed his shovel into the ground and began to dig furiously. "I'm not in an ant tunnel anymore. A few minutes should do." Javier rubbed his eyes, unfazed by the magic. "He's never taken sleeping meds in his life," Lloyd chuckled. "No spells putting him down." Javier looked down, watching Lloyd dig like a mole. "I'll laugh at this later." "Get in here!" Lloyd shouted, pointing to the growing tunnel. Javier nodded, entering the makeshift passage. He readied his blade, energy surging around it. Skill activated. Explosion slash. He thrust his sword into the wall. Boom! And a pillar of flame tore through the barrier, stunning Ruffin. A giant hole opened up, and Lloyd rose from the ground like a vengeful spirit, his eyes glowing with fury. "I've never seen a monster like you," Ruffin hissed, scrambling backward. Desperate, he slammed both palms into the ground. A glowing red circle burst open behind him. Magic surged, and from the circle emerged a massive two-headed beast. Ruffin laughed maniacally. "Even if my experiment failed, this is my greatest creation." The monster towered over them, covered in steel-like armor. "Try scratching it," Ruffin mocked. Lloyd tensed. "This might be bad." Javier didn't hesitate. With a burst of mana, he leapt into the air. Skill activated, ripping wave. His blade slashed through the beast's armor, cutting it clean in half. Ruffin stood paralyzed in shock. Lloyd's jaw dropped. "What? That move?" He looked at Javier. "That wasn't in the book. That technique. It wasn't mentioned at all." Javier calmly landed, sheathing his blade. His clothes were singed, but his eyes burned with resolve. "Your move," he said.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share.